everyone, Carl Blair with the Stuck Mic Avcast. I'm here at Plant City Airport. In this video, we're going to answer the question from episode 187. Had to do with the Los Angeles ANJLL 4 Dinero transition with the 2.5 left ILS. We asked, how would you descend along that transition, the Dinero transition on the ANJLL 4, and then shoot the ILS to 2.5 left? So let's look at the answer to that question. So let's review the question from the last episode of the Stuck Mic Avcast. We discussed the Los Angeles ANJLL 4 ILS 2.5 left transition. We're given the clearance to descend via the ANJLL 4 ILS 2.5 transition, and I asked a few questions. What is the bottom altitude? How do you descend on the star? And how do you descend on the ILS and fly this ILS? So first of all, as a review, what is a bottom altitude on the star? The bottom altitude is the lowest altitude authorized on a star or star runway transition. Now, if you look at this, you'll see we're going from the east to the west, from the right to the left, and Circus is going to be our transition for landing 2.5 left. Let's zoom in on that and take a look at what the bottom altitude is. So let's answer that one first. The bottom altitude is 12,000 feet. 12,000 feet is the bottom altitude, the lowest authorized altitude on this transition. Say you're using some sophisticated equipment or a FMS, etc. You can put in 12,000 as your bottom altitude when you start actually descending via this transition. We won't go into that too much because we wanted to go over, how we would actually descend on this. So let's go back and take a look. But before we do that, just a quick review. The mandatory block altitude is in that Circus. If you notice there's a line above, a line below, I'm sure I'm going to get this question. That's a mandatory block altitude. What is that? That's the minimum and maximum altitude at that intersection or point. That Circus is the minimum altitude of 12, maximum altitude of 14. So it's between those two, but between inclusive, if you want to look at it that way also. A lot of people say that's between 12 and 14,000, but there's a minimum and maximum altitude. So let's look at the transition. Here we are in our super duper charged SR-22, and we're up at flight level 360, and we were given the Dinero transition on this star. So let's kind of fly through this. Again, we're looking at the altitudes, how we would descend, where we would slow. There's a lot of other things on this. If you have a question, of course, you can send us an email and ask us, how do we fly along this transition? Or if there's something on here you don't understand, just point it out and we'll explain it. So the next thing we do after the Dinero transition, we go to Sellers. Okay, we're still at 360, Flojo, Sally, and then next comes our first restriction, altitude restriction. And there's that mandatory altitude from 30,000 to a minimum of 240, 300 and 240. There's something else there too. There's an airspeed restriction. If you notice, there's an airspeed restriction of 280 knots. So we have to cross that at 280 knots. No slower, no faster. It's at 280 knots. And from 300 to 240. Our next crossing restriction is ANJLL. ANJLL is actually what this is named after, the ANJLLs for arrival. And we were doing the Dinero transition, so this is going to start our arrival here. So we're looking at the ANJLLs at 240 to 190. Our next crossing will be 17,000 at or above 17,000. Remember the line, at or above 17,000. The next is Boyle at or above 14,000. And then next is Circus. Circus, we have to be at 270 knots and between 12,000 and 14,000 inclusive. So our lowest altitude and bottom altitude, again, as a review, is that 12,000 feet. So after Circus, we're going to land on 2.5 left, the 2.5 left transition. We are clear for the approach. So how do we fly that approach? Let's take a look at the Localizer, and we'll look at this is a plan view of the Localizer, the ILS 2.5 left. And this is can be really confusing. You see all these numbers everywhere. So I usually don't follow along on the plan view as far as the altitudes and my restrictions, but there are a few on this we have to look at first before we can actually go to the profile view, because on the profile view, as opposed to this being the plan view, you're not going to see that. So let's take a look first. Here we are. We're at, say, 12,000 feet, and we are now, Circus, at or below 270 knots. So now once we go past that initial approach fix, at or below 270, can we start slowing? Yep, sure can. Right when we cross Circus, let's start slowing down. It's a good idea, too, if you're going that fast on the ILS here. So we start here, and this is why I said you have to use this plan view to actually start this approach in your altitudes, because what's going to happen next as we progress? We're going to transition to crane, and we have to transition at 10,000 feet is our next altitude we can go down to. So that's on that transition from the Circus to crane, and then notice there's crane there, crane intersection right there, and that starts down to the next altitude, and the next altitude, and the next altitude. We're not going to talk about it here on this plan view. We're going to talk about these altitudes on the profile view. Like I said, if you look here, there's just so many altitude restrictions. And then get to Lima, which is our initial approach fix, and then land. So let's look at that from the profile view. Here we are back on the profile view at crane intersection, remember, at or above 10,000 feet. So how would we actually fly this approach and at what altitudes? Oh, we had set 10,000, and at crane we need to be at or above 10,000. At Tarok we have to be at or above 9,000. Next we'll set in 8,000, so we're at or above Dynamo at 8,000. Fueler at or above 7. Gate at or above 5. Honda at or above 3,600. The next fix, final approach fix, there it is. There's your lightning bolt, and there's 1,900 feet in Lima. So after Honda, you would set in 1,900 feet. You would start down, and you can actually arm your approach for the glide slope. We're going to head down the glide slope to our altitude, our decision altitude, and our decision altitude will be 304 feet. Again, all this information here, I was just asking, how we would actually fly this approach and what altitudes we would descend to. Remember, during this approach, you're going to be slowing down. So one of the most important things to do is on the arrival, when it says you can slow to at or below 270, start slowing down because it comes really quickly. Well, that's it for this approach for the ILS 25 left, Angels 4 with the transition of the narrow. Hey, I hope you enjoyed that video. Don't forget to subscribe here because we're going to have more of those questions of the week here at the Stuck Mike Avcast. Remember, all the links that you need to look at the approach plates, the arrivals, are at the bottom of this video. And subscribe at stuckmikeavcast.com and also here at the YouTube channel. Fly safe, fly smart. We'll talk to you next episode.